Watch this. Dots on a dark field, nothing else, no players, no crowd, no stadium roar, just points of light holding their positions and one line, sweeping forward until it locks. A stoppage time equalizer at this World Cup had already sent a stadium into chaos. Seconds later, it was wiped off the board, not because a linesman guessed wrong, because somewhere underneath that stadium, a machine had already answered a question no human eye was fast enough to even ask. Hold on to that moment. By the time we come back to it, you'll know exactly what that machine heard. Here's the promise for the next few minutes. You're about to see exactly what that machine sees, and it's not what you think. This isn't 4 separate gadgets bolted together for television. Underneath every match at this tournament runs one real-time computer system, and it never once looks for a footballer. It only ever looks for numbers. Stay with me to the end, and you'll know exactly where that machine's authority stops and why FIFA built it to stop there on purpose. First, a 10-second rule because everything downstream depends on it. Offside comes down to one straight line drawn across the pitch at the exact instant the ball is played, comparing the attacker's furthest forward point against the second-to-last defender. Miss that instant by a fraction of a second, and you're measuring the wrong moment entirely. 5 things have to happen in order for a computer to make that call, see, fuse, decide, notify, and finally hand the decision to a person. Let's build it stage by stage. It starts months before kickoff. Every player at this World Cup across all 48 national squads stepped into a scanning rig and stood still for about a second, while it built a millimeter-accurate 3D mesh of their exact body. Call it a stadium's worth of pre-measured mannequins, one per player, filed away before a ball is ever kicked. Cameras only ever see a blur of moving pixels. This is the exact shape the system already knows to look for underneath that blur. On match day, more than a dozen dedicated tracking cameras, mounted high under the stadium roof, do nothing but watch the pitch, separate from every camera feeding the broadcast, 50 times every second. They log where each of those pre-scanned bodies is standing. Here's what that actually looks like from the inside, not what's on your screen at home. Not players, dots, not a game, a stream of coordinates. But the system doesn't even track a whole player. It tracks 29 specific points on each body: head, shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, knees, ankles, feet. Here's why that's exactly the right 29, and not just a face. The offside law is written entirely around the furthest forward point of a body that's legally allowed to touch the ball. So the system was never built to recognize a person. It only needs the handful of joints the rule itself is defined on, and nothing else. Zoom out for a second and look at the fire hose this produces. Every one of those cameras is reporting 50 times a second for the entire 90-plus minutes across 22 moving bodies. Add it up, and a single match generates well over 150 million individual tracking points. Nobody watches that number happen. It just streams, silently, underneath the game you're actually watching. Then there's the ball. Inside the Adidas Trionda sits a motion sensor, tucked into just one of its 4 panels, with the other 3 carrying counterweights so its own presence doesn't tilt the physics it's supposed to measure. That sensor doesn't take a picture. It measures its own acceleration and spin 500 times every second, a fresh reading every 2 milliseconds. It has no idea where a single player is standing. All it ever knows is exactly when something struck it. Think of it like a seismograph bolted to a football. A seismograph never sees the earthquake. It just feels the ground shake, and from the shape of that shake, you can tell a distant tremor from someone stomping next door. The ball's sensor works the same way. It can't see a foot, a knee, or a head coming. It just feels the spike the instant one connects, and the shape of that spike is enough to tell a firm strike from a glancing touch. One more set of eyes belongs to a completely separate job, the goal line itself. 7 high-speed cameras aim at each goal, 14 in total, and the system only needs 2 of those 7 to actually see the ball to triangulate exactly where it is. Same vendor's lenses, Sony's Hawkeye, running both jobs, but a completely different geometry problem, a fixed plane at the goal mouth instead of a moving line across the whole pitch. Keep that goal line pipeline in your pocket. It turns out to be the easy case, and we'll come back to it. Here's a popular myth worth killing before we go any further. People assume that connected ball is what proves a goal was legitimate. It isn't, and a famous call at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar proves the opposite. A contested goal came down to whether the ball had fully left the field before being played back in, a margin later reported at under 2 millimeters. FIFA confirmed that call from broadcast camera imagery, not the ball sensor. The chip inside it only ever answers one question: was the ball touched? Whether it crossed a boundary line is still a job for cameras and for human eyes. Here is the actual engineering problem the whole system exists to solve. The old manual process, still the human fallback today, needed someone to freeze a broadcast frame and judge by eye the exact instant the ball was played and exactly where a defender was standing in that same frame. Both of those guesses are more imprecise than they sound. At 50 frames a second, a sprinting player can drift roughly 20 centimeters, most of a stride, between one frame and the very next. So, here's the fix, and it isn't a better camera. It's fusing two signals that are each, alone, useless for this. The ball sensor doesn't watch the game, it only ever answers when. The cameras don't know when, they only ever know where, frame by frame. Offside needs both questions answered at the exact same instant. So the system takes the sensor's sharp, unmistakable spike, the kick point, accurate to about 2 milliseconds, roughly 10 times tighter than a single camera frame, and stamps that one instant onto every player's already tracked skeleton. 2 clocks, and the system welds one straight onto the other. There's one more trick hiding in that fusion step. A crowded penalty box can hide a defender's foot behind 3 other bodies, and raw pixels can't see through that. But because every player's live position is constantly being matched against that pre-built 3D mesh from months earlier, the system can carry a short occlusion using the body it already knows, not the pixels it happens to be missing right now. It isn't guessing anatomy from scratch. It's spitting a known shape onto a partial view. Run that fusion, and the resulting line lands accurate to about 10 centimeters, roughly the width of a hand, across an entire pitch. Hold on to that number. It's about to pull double duty because it isn't just a measure of how precise the system is. It's about to become the exact policy the system is allowed to act on. Which brings us back to that stoppage time goal from the very start. Officials reportedly pulled up the ball's motion trace, synced frame for frame to the video, and there it was. A distortion in the signal, shaped exactly like a head touch, a fraction of a second before replay ever showed contact. That touch reset he was standing in an offside position the instant the ball was next played. The naked eye missed it. Slow motion replay missed it. A machine that only ever answers when didn't. So a machine can compute a line to the width of a hand. Does that mean it gets to make the call? No, and that limit was drawn on purpose, not by accident. Every proposed offside decision, however clean it looks, is reviewed by a human video official who specializes in exactly this, sitting in a centralized review room, not even in a stadium, before it's ever shown to a soul. Semi-automated doesn't mean the automation ran out of confidence. It means someone decided a machine should never get the last word, only the fastest possible draft. What actually changed for this tournament is how fast that draft can travel. In 2022, only a player more than half a meter offside got flagged automatically at all, and even then, everything routed through the video room before an official heard a word. This year, that threshold tightens to about 10 centimeters, and for those clear cases, an automated alert now reaches the assistant referee's earpiece directly, so they can raise the flag almost immediately. The human review hasn't disappeared. It's running in parallel with the flag now, instead of holding the flag hostage until the review finishes. Here's the number that actually matters to a match in progress. Before any of this existed, the average manual offside review took about 70 seconds, a small eternity while 22 players stand around and a stadium holds its breath. With this system doing the fusing, FIFA's own testing found that same review dropping to somewhere around 20 seconds. That's workflow time, not raw computer speed, but it's the difference between a match that stalls and a match that barely notices. Remember that goal line pipeline from earlier, the easy case? Here's why it's easy. The geometry never moves. It's one fixed plane at one fixed mouth, and the rules that have governed it since 2012 require an answer within 1 second, full stop. When the ball crosses, the system doesn't route through a video room at all. It buzzes straight onto the referee's wrist. FIFA has long claimed it gets this right nearly every time, 99.9% by their own count, though that figure comes from FIFA and its vendor, not an outside audit. Either way, the referee feels the vibration and blows the whistle before most of the stadium has processed what happened. There's a detail here any engineer will recognize instantly. Overlaying a computed line onto whichever camera angle a broadcast director happens to be showing means every one of those dozens of cameras has to expose the exact same instant off one shared clock signal with matching timecodes so any 2 frames can be paired up automatically. Skip that shared clock, and the same frame number on 2 different cameras can drift apart by milliseconds, quietly reintroducing the very imprecision the whole fusion trick was built to kill. A football stadium, it turns out, runs on the same discipline as any distributed system that has to agree on a single moment in time. Which brings us to the strangest use of this system so far, and arguably the one that reveals the most trust it's earned. In a quarterfinal in Miami this tournament, broadcast replay appeared to show the ball clipping an overhead camera cable in midair, moments before a stoppage time equalizer. Commentators argued the cable had changed its flight. FIFA's answer wasn't a fresher angle or a slower replay, it was the sensor. Their statement was blunt: the ball's sensor showed no spike, no heartbeat, at the moment it was supposedly struck, and therefore no evidence it had ever been touched at all. A stadium full of people and every camera in the building thought they'd seen contact. The sensor said otherwise. The sensor won. None of this works by pretending the machine never fails, though. When cameras genuinely lose a clean line of sight, a goal-mouth scramble, a crowded box, officials fall back to drawing crosshair lines by hand across several broadcast angles, the exact method used before any of this existed. And if the goal line hardware itself ever malfunctions mid-match, the rule is unambiguous. The referee stops using it for the rest of that game, reports it, and the match still stands. Football doesn't grind to a halt when the computer breaks. It just quietly hands the whistle back to a human and keeps playing. Zoom out, and the scale of what's running under this tournament is hard to hold in your head at once. 48 teams, 104 matches, 16 stadiums across 3 countries. Every single one of them shadowed by the same real-time pipeline you just watched, stitched together from a discipline that has nothing to do with football, computer vision, sensor fusion, and real-time notification systems, wearing a jersey. Billions of people are about to watch this system work, and almost none of them will ever learn its name. So, here's the whole shape, start to finish. Every player gets scanned into a 3D mesh before the tournament even begins. Cameras and a sensor-packed ball turn the live match into raw numbers, 50 times a second and faster. Fusion stamps the ball's precise when onto the camera's precise where, solving a problem neither signal could ever solve alone. The verdict races to a human, sometimes in under a second, sometimes as a flag in an earpiece. And at every single step, a person still has to say yes before it counts. That's the machine behind that stoppage time call from the start of this video. Not a replacement for judgment. A way of making judgment faster, and once in a while a way of knowing something no eye in the building could. The referee's whistle still decides the match. It's just listening to a machine that never blinks, and never once looks up to see who's playing.